Just keep matriculating the ball down the field, boys.
Welcome to the all-encompassing sports podcast.
Oh, he's having it go!
You'll be hearing from all of the biggest newsmakers in sports,
Hello, you play to win the game.
where you'll hear from all types of guests on all topics.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
What the hell's going on out here?
And now, with sports, Rob.
Hi, I am indeed Rob, and welcome again to another episode of With Sports Rob. I'm your host, and today's guest is my good college buddy Scott Dagenhart. We, of course, are discussing the Super Bowl this week, so hopefully you can enjoy some of that banter and information. Also, a little bit of discussion about Tulane, but I just wanted to say Scott's a dear friend of mine, close buddy. Met in college, have had our ups and downs, just kind of done our thing, but it's been absolutely awesome to know him. Very smart guy. He's a family man. Definitely takes care of business in whatever he does, as he'll prove during this interview. But yeah, I just wanted to welcome you to the show. And now, let's welcome Scott. Hey, Scott. Good to see you. Thanks for being my guest. How are you?
I'm great, man. I'm great. Yeah, I got a sunny day here. I'm excited to be here. It's my first podcast ever. So, rock and roll. You get to break me into the scene here. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I feel very similar in terms of your thoughts on this being your first podcast, because three episodes ago was my first podcast too of any type whatsoever. So yeah, you may be a guest on a podcast. I'm a host on a podcast. We're both fairly nubile to this, but yeah, we're going along. But yeah, I just wanted to get into how you got into sports. Give me your backstory. What drew you to the games and everything? What's your fandom story?
Well, I'd say a really important thing about sports for me, my dad was a star athlete. He's actually in the Hall of Fame for his high school. He was a state wrestling champion. He played football, all this stuff. So my dad pushed me a lot to do sports. He had his own fandoms and things like that. And I'll tell you, as my ability to play competitive sports with other people, as high school ended and things like that, and I wasn't gonna continue. I wasn't gonna be a pro at anything. I wasn't gonna play NC2A level sports, anything like that. I got away from it for a while, and that kind of brings us to we were talking about us being new at this podcast stuff, right? And that gets us closer to you and I meeting, because that's about freshman year. We were both freshmen then. We're kind of freshmen at this right now, right?
Yep,
back around freshman year, we both landed in New Orleans, and, I'd always been fascinated with the city, fascinated with jazz and things like that. And ironically, I mean, the Saints were never good, but I always loved the Saints. That wasn't a reason to go there, but I always liked the Saints. It was an excuse to kind of like the Saints. And when they started to be successful, there was that, some early playoff noise. Yeah, the Jim Haslett era, Aaron Brooks, Deuce McAllister, Charles Grant, all that stuff. So that was always a lot of fun. I could see in my head, man, I used to go up Chapatula Street, right? And there was this big mural it was a bunch of dogs with Saints helmets on, right? And it said, New Orleans has let the dogs out. I can see that in my head like it was yesterday. That was like, 25 years ago, right? As far as fandom goes, I became a straight up New Orleans guy the longer I lived there. Got into the Saints. We finally got a basketball team back, kind of right before I graduated Tulane. Tulane stunk. I wasn't a Tulane fan back then, but thankfully they got some work on that, right? And that's an ironic thing. Like, we had the undefeated season, right? We had that. That was so cool. And you kind of looked at it and you thought, wait, is this football school? It's football state. It was from LSU, right? Hour and a half or so, hour and a half up the 10 or 61 or whatever. And you kind of look at that and you go, well, is this a football school? I don't remember anybody ever talking about Tulane being a football school before. Frankly, I barely remembered anybody ever talking about Tulane. I don't know, but what about you? I mean, did you had some kind of impression of this place as a football school, or did you feel like that was part of the experience?
That's absolutely fair to ask me that question, because yes, I haven't talked about this on the podcast, but we did both attend Tulane. I gotta admit, I didn't graduate from Tulane. I spent 3 years there, 3 interesting years of my life. But yeah, when when I was touring Tulane, one of the things I saw, I believe it was there when I was touring it, perhaps it was my freshman year, but there was a statue of Sean King and that 98 undefeated football team in the UC, which no longer exists. Well, the statue may exist, but the UC no longer exists. So yeah, and I did have, when I first decided to apply to Tulane, I was well aware of that undefeated season. I came in with the false impression that possibly we would be some kind of sports school. We would have mix academics with sports because obviously Tulane had an academic reputation at the time, which still kind of does. I don't know if it slipped. I haven't really followed it. I've kind of tangentially gotten information about it. Kind of, I'm obsessed about my schooling, so I did look at the U.S. News World Rankings, and I know we've fallen from where we were when we were there, but that's another story. We're not going to get into that. But yeah, my impression of Tulane was that I would get the best of both worlds, get a good academic education, and kind of have that sports feel kind of going through the whole campus, which didn't really exist, as you're kind of saying. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about sports radio.
Well, so when I finished with Tulane, I got into food service more seriously. I'd had some dabblings in it leading up to finishing school, but I bar backed and done promotions for a bar there in the quarter, so I could get into music for free and all that kind of stuff. But when I really got into it is I took a job delivering pizzas, of all things,
right.
And so I had a lot of time in the car, driving around by myself. They didn't want anybody else in the car with you. And you have to fill that space. And everybody that I worked with there, everybody was talking about sports radio. Everybody was talking about Jim Rome. They were all Jim Rome fans. It was Jim Rome this, Rome, you're a clone. The Alvin's mix, and I mean, to this day, some of those people I could hit them on the phone and they'll go, give me back my horse, or I don't even know if people know this that Alex Trebek was in this whole big lawsuit for having his horse stolen, and Rome used to just like give me back my son thing, Mel Gibson from Lansing. And he modulated to make it "Give me back my horse," but I can still say "Give me back my horse" to some of these guys, and they'll remember that. So it was like my gateway into the business, right? Was that I needed to be able to talk about sports, or there was not going to be anything to talk about. If I didn't do that, if I didn't jump in and go, okay, I haven't really cared about this crap for years. I mean, Tulane did a heck of a marketing job getting me there, thinking that there was sports involved, and they had the terrible games in the Superdome with half the dang dome blocked off. Right. And you remember Chris Selfo sending out the dang emails like, trying to hype people. And I held cellular phones in such low regard at that time that like Selfo and cell phone was like this bad joke in my mind. Finally get to use like all these years later, right? But yeah, I really got into Rome, and he has that particular delivery, that meter, and that's why he calls everybody that calls into his show a clone, because they're all trying to rip Jim Rome off, which we could talk about how cool or not that is, but it gave me a language. It gave me a way to communicate with these people who were completely disparate from my life experience. I was a pasty kid from where the hell ever, and showed up in New Orleans. I love New Orleans, man. I was having a good time and everything, but I didn't really have Tulane's a bubble, and I never weigh in, and Rome was kind of like my way in. Okay. And, so the other half of it that got me back into that is, I'd always kind of been an NBA fan in the 90s, right? When we were kids. I was really into the Knicks. I really love those 90s Knicks team. Your Ewings. Probably my all-time favorite player is John Starks. I love John Starks. But Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley, all those guys, Allen Houston, all those guys on those New York Knicks teams. That was like a deal, but there was no basketball in New Orleans until 2003, I guess. They moved the Hornets down from Charlotte, and that felt like some vindication for me. I had left Charlotte area and gone down to New Orleans. I was like, hey man, there's this multi-million-dollar enterprise that followed me down here, man, and that felt really cool. I don't know. It's like, I know that's like it didn't have anything to do with me. I'm not that crazy, but it was cool. Cool. It was like, hey, look, that place is stupid. This is the cool place that I came to, And, so we're driving around at night, you get this, like, big adrenaline rush when it's dinner rush, right? And I cool off from that, and I throw on NBA hoops. And, the Hornets, particularly that 04-05 season, were just garbage. I mean, they were garbage. They got caught up in that Baron Davis stuff. He didn't want to come off the bench. He didn't want his injury to be over. He had a guaranteed contract. He wanted to trade. He didn't want to be in New Orleans, I guess. I don't know if it was an issue with New Orleans. I don't know if it was an issue with the organization. Baron Davis was ultimately a really great basketball player, right? But he didn't want to be there. And so getting caught up in that, we had a terrible basketball team. But what happens when you listen to a terrible team for a few years? I mean, you're a Jets fan, right? You know what it's like to like a terrible team. You love them even more, right? And of course, if there's ever that payoff, there's never going to be that payoff. In the story, there's never going to be a payoff. But I drove around and I listened to Jerry Valancourt, who had come from Charlotte. He was a Charlotte area guy. I think he was from New York area originally, and he was a basketball coach, I think, for a long time. So his insight into the game was really amazing. And my basketball knowledge jumped from like playing 12 and under hoops when I was a kid to somebody who could really talk and speak and think and look at a basketball game and know what was going on. And, between that and that beautiful 04 finals, Pistons and Lakers and all of that, and so that was a lot of fun, and I got dragged in. I was like, wow, sports are cool again. This is fun. And it's something I could talk about to anybody. Anybody, or not anybody, but the majority of people walk into a room, and if there's nothing else to talk about, like, don't talk about something boring like the weather. Let's talk about sports, man. Let's talk about, sure, you like LSU? I hate LSU, man. We could talk about that, and we don't have to hate each other. I could just say I hate LSU, and you could say you don't, man. It's cool. I mean, it might be a little different if you're a Falcon fan or a Cowboys fan or something like that, but... I mean, what do you want me to say, right? It's the Cowboys of the Falcons, man. I mean, I can't say nothing nice about those teams.
Right,
it's like Duke. Nothing nice about Duke. I live up here now. But we roll forward. We had the storm. We don't need to talk about the storm, but real fandom, like, really, really set in for me that 2006 season. And I don't love to tell this story all the time, but week 1 of 2005 of Katrina year was in Carolina.
Okay.
And my dad felt real bad for me, and he got some nosebleeder seats to that game, right? We won on a last-second field goal. I think it was John Casey was our kicker at that time. And then basically that season was over. You had game 2 of that season. They played it in New York. But it was supposed to be a home game for the Saints. I think they really just didn't know what to do, and they tried to play it like, oh, yeah, we just had September 11th, and you just had this stuff happen, and it's okay, really. And we fumbled on the opening. They tried to do an end around on the opening kickoff and fumbled the dang thing, and the season was basically over. The only other game I really remember, we just got torched by the Packers, like somewhere in mid-season when I was like in hell trying to go back home. Anyway, so I went to that first game of that year. Katrina season happens. I went to the first game back in the Dome, and it was amazing. And I still watch that block punt sometimes, But yeah, so that's what kind of got me back into sports, and it's been like a thing ever since. Like I said, it's something I could talk to people about. I can get really esoteric and intellectual and all that stuff in my brain, but man, you can talk about sports, and people get that, and you can at least get a passionate thing out of somebody without picking a fight with anybody about it.
Right.
And that's cool. I think that's really cool as a way to sort of bring people together. I think that's a cool and important thing that sports can do if you let it.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm going to get into something that Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and at this point I'm staring down the notion of youth sports, right? I'm looking at that because I got a kid who's about to get to that age. And I really, I've made contact, even though I've lost a little bit of contact over the years with being directly in the city with my sports fandom, right? I've gained this perspective of, wow, this is like a way to grow somebody. This was something that was important to me, body movement and discipline and learning how to work with other people and strategize and things like that. These are important things for growing up and sort of improving yourself in the world. And that's a beautiful gateway to that. So now this has kind of got me back involved, and it's great. But anyway, man, please lay it on me. You were segueing into another. I totally ripped the fervor there.
Yeah, youth sports and community sports really bring families and people together, and they teach kids a lot of good lessons. I don't know if you have any thoughts on. Well, you were mentioning in between takes that the WNBA is something that you've gotten into, or at least you have some kind of knowledge of. Is that something your daughter brought you to?
I don't have enough knowledge. It's something that
Okay,
that I'm
okay.
going to commit myself to.
You're trying. Okay.
It's either that or women's soccer. I haven't decided which one yet, but it's something I'm interested in. I love the idea of empowering women through sports.
Right.
I think women are the future. I'm married to an absolutely incredible one. I have an incredible daughter who's about to get into all this stuff. So, it's something that I think is untapped for us as men. We got used to growing up in our time of, oh, man, we only care about men's sports. We only care about this stuff. And, I mean, I remember coaches of women's teams, like when we were in high school talking about how it was women's basketball, you kept 3 people on either side of the floor, and it was only 2 that moved back and forth between. There are all these different crazy rules and stuff like that. So that's it's amazing how far it's come, and hopefully I can tap into some of that energy and figure out. I don't know. There's not anything that's jumped out at me as far as either of those storylines go. But that's kind of my thing is a storyline and using it as a way to hype the kid up, because this is something you got to pass on, right? You pass on your fandom. She's got a Saints blanket on her bed, that kind of thing, right?
All right. Yeah, if I may make 2 suggestions to my other former connections, either the Liberty or the Aces. I don't know how you feel, but I don't know if you have any opinion whatsoever. But those are 2 good teams.
Yeah.
I
got some.
Take that on, Liberty or Aces. I mean, if I don't know if there's a team. I don't know any of the Southern teams very well, because I'm trying to connect. I maybe have some more distant relation with or more long-term relationship with women's basketball, because UConn was a powerhouse in the 90s. I was growing up in New York, so I was well aware of their dominance. Kind of knew about the Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi and all those late 90s, early 2000s players. So I had some insight into that stuff, but I've kind of reconnected with the WNBA over the last couple of years with my geographical connections to Las Vegas and New York. So the Liberty and the Aces are 2 of the teams I like. They're both really good. I think there's a couple teams, and this is true of I don't watch women's soccer, but there's a lot of that you can find teams where you have players who are super impassioned about causes, which you could teach your kid about, both teamwork and the fundamentals and kind of how you got to work together. And you can say, hey, look at, Sue Bird. She's retired now, but she was on the Seattle Storm, and she's really big on causes, on social justice. She wants to push forward a narrative that everyone's equal and that women deserve the same rights as men. But not only that, Maye, another UConn player from the 90s, she recently advocated for a guy in prison who was unjustly imprisoned, and she left the WNBA to get his release and is now working as kind of a social justice advocate. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with the WNBA. I know the the National NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League, also has a lot of that. I mean, I'm sure you're well aware of Megan Rapinoe. She's a huge advocate for social justice. So yeah, there's a lot of that in both sports. You can teach them both about. You can teach your daughter both about the way that people work together, the way that schemes create action and all this different stuff. And you can also say, hey, look at this. They're standing up for the causes they believe in. You can do that too. So there's a lot of ways to pick and choose what you're going to root for. But I'm trying to sway you towards the Aces, because that's my WNBA team. But I'm not going to sway you too hard. I'll let you discover that in your own time and kind of work through whatever you want to work through, and maybe let your daughter kind of figure out which team she likes based on colors or mascots or something. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I mean, the closest I've come, I was following Cameron Brink a little bit because she looks like Elsa. The kid likes Frozen. The kid loves Frozen. Princess. And I was like, okay, there's another, I don't know. It's the most timorous connection possible. There's nothing really tangible there. But anyway.
But the truth is, and I don't want to get too deep into the women's sports stuff. Obviously, it's important to advocate for women's sports. It's a growing field. WNBA is probably with Caitlin Clark and some of these other players that are coming into the league. WNBA is one of the fastest growing leagues in America. But yeah, I mean, if your daughter or you feel that Cameron Brink looks like Elsa and that's a connection she can make, then that's the way to introduce her. That's absolutely fine, and I love that.
Yeah, who knows? Either way.
Yeah,
man. I'd love to get back to football. I know football's big. the docket this weekend. You got, I don't know, some kind of a game or something like that. Was it like the Manny Mojack? Was it Manny Mojack for autos? Or Manny Mojack,
right?
Tecmo Super Bowl or something. I don't know, something like that, right?
That's what we should call it, the Manny Mojack. Yeah. Well, that's a good segue. Thank you for putting the host back in direction. I appreciate that. But yeah, you have some thoughts on what the Seahawks. Well, there's a lot of ways to go about this. I know we'll kind of get into some. I don't know how deep a dive. You have some. I know you don't believe this, but you have some deep dives on what's happening in that game. I know that. But let's start out with the thing you brought up most recently to me. What are you seeing from Seattle's defense, specifically what they did against the Rams?
Well, here's what I saw, and I'm not, I am not a tactical football expert. I'm not your X's and O's guys necessarily. But I was just watching their DBs, and I was watching the way that Matt Stafford played lights out in that game, particularly on first and second down. The guy, I mean, he looked like he couldn't fail. And right. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. And he should do that, right? Guy's been around the league for a while. He's got a ring. He should be able to do that at this point. You got a pretty good receiving core there for the Rams. But what I liked about, and this is what I like about Seattle in general. I mean, and it's tough for me to say that I like anything about Seattle, believe me.
Okay.
I mean, I had to live through the beast mode game, okay? I don't have kind thoughts about that team necessarily. The best thing I can say about them is that they're far away. But those kind of scrappy DBs, the way that they were getting in front of the receivers for the Rams, I watched the way that they were, just kind of protecting routes and really owning third and fourth down. And I think that's really important. Obviously, I mean, these are obvious things. That's an easy take. Oh yeah, they own third and fourth down. But if you're able to take a veteran quarterback, a guy who's absolutely lights out. I mean, maybe he's getting towards the tail end of his career, but I mean, you watch this guy scrap through it with the Lions. You watch this guy. I mean, dude, those Lions teams that he played on were terrible, but he scrapped through it and he survived. And he made a name for himself, and he made such a name for himself that he was able to get that, be a part of that absolutely magnificent trade, to get himself out to L.A. And thinking about that from a career perspective, I mean, you go from Detroit, which is cold and nasty and gnarly, to LA, which is pretty nice most of the year, right?
Yeah.
And to be in a bit major media market like that, and to still play lights out, even under the bright lights, because it can't be easy to play in LA. To watch a guy like that get shut in a playoff game on third and fourth down in particular, man, the defensive backs in particular had to be doing something right. And it was blocked passes, I think, that really made the difference in that game. I don't know. Tell me what you saw. Did you have any kind of, real look at that film or give a close look at that game?
Right. Well, I watched the game, but I'm going to take your thoughts here because I think you've eruditely explained what happened in that game and kind of gone over what was the key factor. 2 points. One, you're saying Matt Stafford, good quarterback, maybe towards the tail end of his career. He's the front runner for MVP this year, so they shut down the presumptive MVP on third and fourth down, and that's pretty impressive. But what you're saying, and you were also mentioning, I believe, and I just want to confirm, the Seahawks defenders, the DBs, were being physical with the receivers on those third and fourth downs. They're kind of.
There was a great deal of physicality, and it was a lot about, how they were playing their coverage. They seemed to be in the right place at the right time. They seemed to be in front of the guy at the right moments. They seemed to be behind the guy. They were there for a lot of those pass blocks and things like that, breaking things up.
Right.
And, looking at that, when you look at a football game, and this is a general rule, I think, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but if you look at a game and it seems like they're in the right place at the right time, that to me is about preparation.
Right.
Right? And what do you do if you're a team like the Seahawks? Kind of under the radar, you were what, 9-8 last year? 10-7 maybe?
I forget. They were okay with Geno, but they weren't great.
9-8, 10-7.
Yeah.
They were the Pittsburgh Steelers of the freaking NFC, right?
Yeah. Rob Adams would appreciate that.
So, I mean, I wanted to give a shout to some of your former guests. I haven't enjoyed the pod up to this point. So
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I saw some professionalism and some really cool takes on that, and gave me a lot of inspiration to walk in here and try and figure out how to wrap my mind around doing this thing, right? So,
Thanks, Scott.
good tasting guests, man. And it's been cool to see a little bit about kind of who you are and how you arrived here. He gave
Right.
some nice little nuggets about your entranceway into this world of sports talk and radio and stuff like that I frankly I didn't know. So.
Right.
If nothing else, man, it was great for that. But back to the Seahawks, I feel like these guys were kind of doing this in quiet. They recognized that Geno could only get them so far, and so what? They take a flyer out on Sam Darnold.
Yep.
That's
Yep,
not
for
always
sure.
a good gamble. This as a Jets fan.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
I watched this. I don't know, man. You tell me about the Jets' career. I mean, you watched him play for the Jets.
There's a lot to unpack here, but I'll get into the point that you're asking me about. Yeah, he was awful with the Jets. He was a turnover machine. He still is prone to the turnover, which is why a lot of people think I'm not going to spin this too far. We'll get back to the Super Bowl in a second, but we're kind of moving on towards his past. But yeah, he's a turnover machine with the Jets. He can't find receivers. He's the famous NFL Films line, "I'm seeing ghosts," which has been brought up ad nauseum this week about how he's not seeing ghosts anymore. Maybe who knows? We'll see in the Super Bowl. Is he still going to win the big game? But yeah, with the Jets, I mean. Not only was he bad, he was the 3rd overall pick. So the media and this is whether you're the 3rd overall pick or you're the 70th overall pick. If you're starting for the New York Jets or New York Giants, you're gonna get killed by the media if you're not doing it. And the fans, they hated him. They thought he was the worst quarterback of all time. And I know you have some, but yeah, the point being, with the Jets, he was not a good quarterback. I mean, he showed glimpses. He had the arm strength. He could throw some balls, he could fit some windows, but a lot of times he wasn't seeing the field correctly. And I know you have some experience with that because you've kind of implied this. You're kind of a Carolina guy, so you have some experience with the Panthers use of Sam Darnold.
I will never love the Panthers, but I do live in this area. And
Okay, I'm sorry, Scott. I gotta interject. I know you've told me you hate the Panthers, but that's fair. But I know you know the Panthers, so I'm sorry to bring up a sore subject.
Yeah.
This is go ahead.
No, it's okay. They got the playoffs this year. Kudos to them, right?
Well, that was kind of like that Beast Mode game. Yeah.
Right. It's like stinking into high heaven, right? But anyway, yeah. So what do? I listen to sports talk radio up here in North Carolina and in the Charlotte area. And so, he was an easy target. And, I mean, that sort of is the question for the Super Bowl with him, right? Is, okay, you said, is he seeing ghosts, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, at least he's seeing. I mean, with Jameis, he needed the actual LASIK, right?
That's right. That 30-30 season was with the Saints, right? That 30-30 season, 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions.
Yeah, well, the 30 season was actually with the Bucks, but he had the same tendencies and stuff like that when he came there. But it wasn't the eyes, but it was Darnold seeing ghosts. And here's the thing, and here's the only reason I am a convert on this, and maybe willing to back Sam Darnold as the winning quarterback in this game that's coming up this weekend. For a lot of things, Seattle Seahawks, I think about the incredible takes of some of the media up that way, and I just watched them, all of them, almost universally go, he fell on the ball and took a sack instead of fumbling.
Right.
He did that instead of throwing an interception. Oh my goodness. Oh, this guy, he didn't do the thing that we expected him to do.
Right.
And, if you look at, for this Super Bowl game, neither one of those guys has been there before, but Sam Darnold at least has more experience being somewhere close to there, right?
Sure, last year. Yeah.
He's been in the league longer.
Yep.
And with last year with the success with the Vikings, he sniffed at it at least. Drake Maye hasn't even sniffed at it. He's just been kind of hiding out. The Patriots have stunk the past few years, so
right.
So we'll see. I know Sam Darnold, not that great, but that's what I'm rooting for. Maybe that's what I'm saying. I'm not going to predict a W. I'll say I'm rooting for the guy.
Okay, that's fair. That's part of what we do here. Is we are fans. Most of us, we're not head coaches. We're not media. Somewhat media members, but we're not these high level guys who are just saying, "Oh, I'm X player or Syracuse grad who's in journalism." But yeah, part of the thing about the show is we are fans, so yeah, you are rooting for him. And I will say that Sam Darnold, I'm not going to say Sam Darnold is better than Drake Maye, but I will say that Sam Darnold, over the last 2 years is much improved from what he was in New York, Carolina, and San Francisco. He showed some glimpses of San Francisco, but Kevin O'Connell really did a number on him. He really helped him out, and the OC in Kubiak, I believe, is the OC in Seattle, Clint Kubiak, and he's done some really good things with him. And I don't mean to jump too much, but we are discussing the Super Bowl, and I did want to get to a point on your take about the Seahawks DBs. One of the things that they'll be effective if they're pressing up on the receivers or they're trying to undercut routes, because a lot of those guys don't have that deep ball ability. The guy, and I've mentioned this on my last podcast last week with Johnny Joe Boo, that Keyshawn Boutte is basically the future at number one for the Patriots. Maybe you say, right now Stephon Diggs is still the number one guy, but Boutte's the only guy that's got that kind of deep ball ability where he showed that in the divisional round, where he caught an amazing catch in the end zone, diving, tip of his fingers, 32-yard pass from Drake Maye down the field, obviously. But yeah, he's a smaller receiver. He's under 6 foot. He's under 200 pounds. So if the DBs get physical with him, he's not going to have that success getting off the line or getting through his routes and getting to that deep ball spot. But yeah, if what you're seeing in the film or what you've kind of seen from your viewing of the game is correct, it is possible that maybe he'll get a double move in there where he does kind of move down the field and Drake, and. We'll get it. Let's bring this up now. I know you've got some takes on Drake Maye versus Sam Darnold. You kind of got into your Sam Darnold fandom. What are your thoughts on Drake Maye? You've kind of said he's inexperienced, but just in terms of his kind of fit in where he sits in the sports world with regards to his team and his position and what he's doing and where they've been and what they've done.
Drake Maye, to me, I did have a feeling in my gut that he was going to be successful. He was going to be one of those guys that maybe wasn't quickly out the gate amazing. He wasn't going to make a whole lot of noise. But I think ultimately what I look at in trending in quarterbacks in the NFL is that you have these sort of wildly athletic guys, your Lamar Jacksons, who comes from a clear line of other quarterbacks, right? And there's a lot of draw to guys like that. And I think that, your sort of traditional pocket passer, that's kind of going the way of the dodo, right? And, and that's not to say that either one of those things was ever the best quarterback or the quarterback that was going to, to dominate the future. Because it's a copycat league. One team has success, one guy has success, and they try and do that over and over and over again, right? But, Drake Maye, coming out of Carolina, and I had a good feeling about him, and I feel like he's one of these guys that's going to split the difference on that. You're not going to be worried every down that he's going to get hurt. I worry that Josh Allen. I worried about that with Josh Allen. Guy runs the ball. You're franchise, dude. You're gonna get whacked, man.
Right.
And, Josh Allen's a big boy, right? Lamar Jackson, Michael Vick, all those guys. Those guys who are gonna tuck it and run, man. You're always worried, like, oh man, we can make a great offensive line, but what are we doing, right? So Drake Maye, I think, kind of splits the difference on that. And has showed a great deal of poise in spite of his short time in the league. And here again, we could talk about how that relates to coaching, how that relates to coming up in a well-run organization. I won't say a good organization. Here again, you can talk about the Patriots. I don't have a lot of nice things to say about them.
Right.
Any team that wins that much. I mean, I hate the Yankees too, right? But
on board with that.
I feel like so much of this has been about the teams that I can't stand. I openly apologize. I don't want to piss off any of your listeners or anything like that. But
right now we're concentrated. Yeah, go ahead. Right now we're concentrated in the New York area, so there may be some pissed off people that are Yankee fans, but there's not going to be a lot of love for the Patriots. I don't know about the Seahawks, but and Carolina. I mean, does anyone really care about Carolina? I mean, I know they exist, but does anyone really care about? I don't mean your state. I just mean the Panthers. I don't know. I don't know if anyone really cares about. Maybe there are there diehard Panthers fans in the Charlotte area.
I know they exist, but I don't even know what they live under.
Right.
I'm sure they're there. I'm sure that there are people who have had season tickets since the mid '90s when they came into the league or whatever. But do I know that guy? Do I know diehard Panther fan guy? The one diehard Panther fan that I actually know is not even from North Carolina. He is from 49ers country and just came here. And he was in a fantasy league that I played in for a couple of years. But but he was a diehard Panther fan from elsewhere, not even from Carolina.
So they do exist, though. They do exist. They do exist.
I mean, yeah, I guess they have to, right? So somebody's putting gas in this machine, right? So somebody's going to pick up Andy Dalton when he gets in a car crash, right? I mean, somebody's doing that.
Right.
I don't know who, man. I don't know. You know, I'm trying to accept the fact that I live in North Carolina and starting to try and like this place. Maybe I need to find that guy because that would be a fun conversation. But yeah, I don't know that exists in my day-to-day life the way they did with Saints fans or something like that.
But I will point out. Let me, before you get to Drake Maye, I just want to wrap a bow on this Panthers discussion. I don't know the exact number, but last year Panthers tickets were being sold for like $5-10 a pop because of how bad they were. Just the hate for Bryce Young, which kind of turned, the lack of depth on that roster was just turning fans away. So I think your experience with Carolina and the Carolina Panthers fan is pretty accurate in that they don't really exist. Maybe they're coming back now that they've made a playoff run and they look a little bit better, but it's been a struggle for, I believe, David Tepper and getting fans into those seats. But yeah, back to Drake Maye and your thoughts on that whole situation.
Well, you touched on both the strengths and weaknesses of his receiving core. I love seeing a veteran guy like Stephon Diggs have a little bit left in the tank.
Yeah.
I love seeing that. I mean, look, I'm 43 years old. I like seeing these older guys do a thing, right? I like to see them successful as a separate storyline. I always want to see the Patriots lose, but as a separate storyline, I can respect that. This Batee kid, he's young, he's strong. Whatever. I look at these guys and I go, wow, you have basically the same statistics as I do, right? 5'11", 5'10", 185 pounds. I'm not that different, but it's distributed way worse. But Maye, I mean, so he's got some guys to chuck the rock to. And I think the other strength that he has, he has a good line in front of him. You're going to get good line play out of a good an organization that knows how to put together a team. And they're putting together a team the right way. And, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think the real battle there, you kind of identified it. You have these DBs who were scrappy and played a really good game against the Rams. You have these receivers who, again, are not – that is – would you even say that was the top five receiving cores in the playoffs this year? I probably wouldn't.
We talking Seattle?
I mean, we don't have to go in. No, I'm talking about New England's receiving core. I would not say that was one of the stronger receiving cores in the game. So I really think that's one of the places where this really plays out. Like, this is where that game is decided. Can Drake Maye get the ball to his guys, or do those DBs, run roughshod on them and turn this into a non-game where they have to figure out how to run the ball or die. And if they fall behind, if Seattle does, Sam Darnold gets he threads that needle that one time, and they get up 7, 10, maybe 14 points. Is this thing over? Can Drake Maye? Does Drake Maye have the internal motivation, whatever it is, or even the preparation level, the knowledge of the NFL game to get himself and to will his team to that? That's my big doubt. That was why I was willing to root for / back Sam Darnold, was that he's just got that little bit more of experience, that little bit more of understanding of what that league plays like and the speed that it plays at. Right. Drake Maye's gotten really far really fast, and it's very impressive. But that to me looks like good coaching, and the coaches, they don't get on the field, and if they do, they get in trouble for that. You start seeing those left, right? So
that's fair. Yeah, so I mean, one of the points you're making is the coaching staffs. Both teams have great coaching staffs. Ben McDonald in Seattle is one of the greatest defensive minds in the game today. Obviously, he's putting together that scheme that's putting those DBs in the position to do what they're doing. And Vrabel and McDaniels in New England, they're both geniuses at what they do too. And I think Vrabel's a master motivator, which is why this team is buying into the whole scheme and package of what the Patriots are. There's a couple points you made that I will bring some of my own context to. Drake Maye's dealing with a throwing shoulder injury, which is it's indeterminate how that's going to affect them. Some people are very nervous about it. Some people are saying it's not going to be a big deal. And again, Drake Maye, is very quick, but he is number 2 in line for not in line, but he's basically the guy that people think is going to finish behind Stafford in the MVP voting. And as you said, that coaching has done things for Drake Maye where he's getting out of bounds. He's not taking his hits. He did take that hit. I think it was on a sack. I think he fell into his right shoulder. So there is that shoulder injury to think about in terms of what's going to happen in the Super Bowl. And but just to highlight your point about great coaching on both sides, as you said, the DBs are in position where it seems like they know exactly what's coming. That's coaching. But I recall I forget exactly what week it was, and I believe it was Travion Henderson, one of the New England running backs, who's actually a rookie. There was a play where he was like a 60, 70-yard run down the field. He broke away from the defense. He turns around, looks to the coaching sideline, and he's like, should I get down? Should I score the touchdown? And literally in that moment, Vrabel said, go ahead and score the touchdown. And they let him score, but the point being, he had the awareness to say, are we going to run out the clock here? Do we have enough? Do we have enough? As little time as possible to get down and just run the clock out where this game's going to be over? Or should I score this touchdown to put us up however many scores it was to really put it away? So yeah, coaching is definitely big on both sides. But you've alluded to this. You're not a Patriot fan. I've seen the memes where it's like rooting for New England Patriots. It's just a little dot in Boston in that Foxborough area, and then the rest of the country's Seahawks, because the Patriots are basically evil empire, turning a little bit. So you don't have a prediction for the Super Bowl. You're just hoping that Sam Darnold wins. You're rooting for Sam Darnold to win.
I guess I wanted to tie my prediction to my fandom and understand that I vote with my heart on this one. I don't feel that I'm qualified to pick things. I mean, you're looking at the guy that decided that in 2006 that Matt Leinart was the future for the Saints. Why would we ever take Reggie Bush or Drew Brees or anything like that? So, in terms of football decisions, maybe I'm not the best rational guy, so I'm just going to vote with my heart and say I like the Seahawks. I like that team.
Okay.
I think they're scrappy. I think they're a great story. Do I have tangible evidence that they're going to win? I don't know. I think that it will be decided between the DBs of the Seahawks and the receivers of the Patriots. I think that it's a real discussion as to whether or not that it is. Is Drake Maye's injury, is it in his head that's going to affect him, or is it his actual body that's going to affect him? Because those are two different things. And I don't have a good read on which one of those that is, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll go ahead. I'll say Seahawks W. That's what I want. And I think that's the stronger storyline there, but man, I don't know how qualified I am for that. So
That's fair. That's fair.
You've been kind of talking Patriots evil empire. I always used to tell people I wish they could just go back to the 3-point stance guy on the side of the helmet. Patriots time that didn't affect me. Yeah, somewhere around in there. I don't know when it was. They went from being a team that I could look at and go, okay, just a weird corner of the United States. It's Boston, it's a cool city, whatever. And you had some, you had some Parcells time there. I always like Parcells. Great coaching tree on that guy, But somewhere in the 2000s there, I don't know. I just decided they won too much. They won.
Yes.
If they're not your team and they win too much, then you don't like them. That's reality. We're human, right? Look at them. They're still human, right?
But yes, you bring up an interesting point, and I will say my prediction for Super Bowl is it will be close. I think it'll be a good match. I think that I'm going to go against not to get on your bad side, Scott, because I know not to get on your bad side, but But I think the Patriots are gonna win. I know that's not actually the common knowledge. I think that unless the Drake May injury is something serious, in which case I can't imagine the Patriots winning because he's the key to their whole team. But yeah, you've been talking about the Patriots winning, which they're doing again, and people are getting sick of them. They won a lot in the 2000s with Brady, Belichick, and obviously Kraft is the connector to now and then. Bill Belichick recently not elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. What are your thoughts on that?
Whew. Well, I've heard a lot of stories, and I imagine it's some combination of all of the above. Nobody likes the guy. He's an old school guy. He's a defensive guy, so he's trying to stop you. I mean, if you looked at his pressers, if you looked at the like the hoodie era pressers, right? That guy, he was basically playing his defense. He was playing the Bill Belichick defense with reporters, right? He was just trying to stop them. You know what I mean? And that's not exactly the best way to relate to the public. And I feel like a lot of that sentiment carries over to his Hall of Fame voting. It's like, oh my goodness, what the Hall of Fame ultimately is a promotional vehicle for the NFL. Let's be fair. And it's like, do we want this guy in here? Really? Do we want to make this that easy? I mean, yeah, he's great. Of course, he's great. So is Barry Bonds. We have feelings about putting Barry Bonds in because he's a jerk off. Oh, wait a minute. Both those guys have been somewhat accused of cheating in tangible, real ways and gotten caught, right? People don't like that, all right? I wonder sometimes about the cheating stuff. I wonder if not every team is doing that. It's one of those things like holding. Like you could call holding on pretty much any play, right? Same thing with Bountygate with the Saints, okay? I can't imagine that those kinds of discussions never happened in any other locker room in the NFL. And that a lot of people were looking around after Deflategate and going, at least it was them and not us.
Right.
But that's not exactly the way to win friends and influence people, right? So, yeah, do I think that there's a lot of sort of negative impact and reverberation back on him as a result of that? Of course. As far as Kraft goes and his missing out in the Hall of Fame as well, it's like, man, look, guys, maybe it wasn't all Belichick. Belichick was a beautiful architect for that. I mean, X's and O's, teaching coaches, teaching. He's a professor. That's the appeal that Belichick has to me. It's a shame. It's like going back to the Yankees. Like Derek Jeter. Got a lot of respect for Derek Jeter, right? A lot of respect for Derek Jeter. But, man, I hated the guy until he retired. Okay?
Right.
And Belichick's the same way. I mean, I couldn't stand that guy. What? Giants? Never been a Giants fan. Patriots? Nope.
Nope.
Browns?
Nope. I think, Cleveland's got passionate fans. I was just about to mock Cleveland, but I can't do that because Cleveland has passionate fans. But yeah,
they got a passionate fan base. I feel bad for them. They lost their team, which I've never thankfully had to experience that. But a good college buddy of mine had to watch the Rams leave St. Louis. I understand how painful that is. I get it, man. I get some of that sentiment there, about Belichick and all that. Do I think he deserves to be in the Hall? Yeah. Do I think it's a mistake not to have him in the Hall? Sure. But maybe he does need to take his stripes a little bit and come to understand and here again, we could tie this back into North Carolina because that's where I am. There's always talk, several different coaches coming to take over that UNC job. And that's a weird place because it's it's a football coach at a basketball school, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the appeal for that for Belichick was that not to hire Belichick was that the guy's got a system, he's got a way, he could just kind of take over and do his thing, and he could be the football coach at a basketball school. Well, Belichick ain't gonna do that, man. That guy cannot check his ego. He cannot do that. It is not in his. I mean, he's got a 26-year-old girlfriend. Guy's got he's got enough rings that if he put them all on, he could like hang out in the same room with Phil Jackson.
Right.
This is not. I mean, he's got reasons for having that ego, but guy's an egomaniac, right? He was never going to back away from that. And I guess he kind of played his hand at Carolina, where he couldn't hide. He couldn't hide behind the shield. He couldn't hide behind Kraft. He couldn't hide behind the fact that he had won a bunch of Super Bowls because he never did anything in college, right? And we kind of saw that, and now we're seeing that play out again. So, the things that we were polite about, that maybe it was a mistake to be polite about with Bill Belichick, are playing themselves out again. I respect Bob Kraft for having that success with more than one group, but even these guys all came up in the Belichick tree, so did we really change?
Right. Right, and you bring up a fascinating point about not being able to hide, kind of being exposed. We're not going to talk about this because neither one of us I don't think has any opinion on this. I have no clue. I think it's Jordan Woods. I have no clue where this Jordan Woods came from because Bill Belichick, in the New England era, he didn't seem like the kind of guy who'd be dating a 26, 27-year-old at the age of 70. Maybe that's just something I was unaware of, but he just seemed to be so engrossed in football that that's all he cared about. And when he got to North Carolina, this whole stuff, it's just fascinating to me. But yeah, the Evil Empire, the whole New England thing, and as you mentioned, the Spygate and Deflategate, I'm sure teams were doing Deflategate. Jimmy Johnson, and this is another fascinating aspect to the Bill Belichick stories. Jimmy Johnson, ex-Cowboys, ex-Hurricanes coach, has said, all of us were doing that. Some people did stand up in the room, supposedly, according to Don Van Natta and Seth Wickersham, and said, hey, these guys cheated. Let's not put them in. This was specifically in terms of what I heard about the Belichick thing. The Kraft thing is breaking on the morning we're recording this, so I don't have as much information about what that was about, or if any of that's leaked out yet. But in terms of Belichick, Jimmy Johnson said, hey, everyone was trying to spy. Everyone was trying to figure out what the signals were on the other team. Everyone was trying to do this. And Jimmy Johnson went on the Pat McAfee show and said, I booked a private plane to Canton to watch Bill Belichick get enshrined this year. I am not going to Canton this year. So that shows you some of the difference between what coaches, what fellow league mates, what other people that have been in similar positions feel about Bill Belichick versus what the majority of maybe the press and the fans of the NFL think about him. But yeah, so I think, Belichick, Kraft not getting the Hall of Fame, I think both little bit of a weird situation. As you point out, as we've kind of discussed, there are varied reasons for it, and I would like to get more knowledge about what happened exactly with Kraft. He's had some scandals, too, both with the spying stuff and then off the football field. I'm not going to get into it because I think it was settled, and I think, I'm not going to set myself for any of that. But he's had some scandals, so I don't know exactly why, Kraft is not getting into the Hall of Fame. I'm a passionate fan. I'm a Jets fan, but I see the greatness in Belichick, and obviously I see the greatness in Kraft, especially with what he's done now that he's fired Gerard Mayo and brought in Mike Vrabel and said, hey, we're going to reboot this thing with a better coach, someone who actually knows what he's doing. And, but I think both of them should be first ballot Hall of Famers. I get the sentiment that maybe they're both too big for their britches. They got to be set back in 1 year and just kind of say, hey, you got to take this on the chin. It's your own fault for the way you acted in terms of how you made the fans and the media feel. But yeah, it's fascinating. Another reporter has come out, or one of the voters has actually come out and said that he voted for a senior class member because they basically only get one shot, and he thought Belichick would get enough votes. So who knows if that's true or that's just his excuse afterwards because you don't see the votes. I'm in agreement that these votes should be transparent. I think all vote, not like national voting, but all voting for the Hall of Fame should be transparent, and these media members and people should say, yeah, this is my ballot, this is why. I think we have to have that kind of accountability so that things, when they do get a little weird, we do know why, and we do have an understanding of what's happening. And that's kind of coming out. There's a lot to unpack there. But let's move on from that. And you kind of mentioned the UNC thing, and you mentioned to me, and just confirm that this is true, just briefly if you can. John Summerall actually was considered for the UNC head coaching job when Belichick got that job, right? The Tulane head coach from last year?
Obviously I wasn't in the boardroom looking at this, but there was a lot of buzz about that job, around December of 24, around that bowl game where we got trounced by the Gators and all that. And he was one of the names that they kept dropping over and over again. I don't know that he ever really seriously was going to come to UNC, but I would say, in my mind, what happened there is they wanted him. They probably threw a number with a nice amount of zeros at him, and he looked around and said, I don't want to be in the ACC.
Sure.
I'm a college football coach. I'm not trying to jump to the NFL. I'm not trying. Maybe he does. I don't know. I don't know the guy, but I think he looked around and said, You tried to build a football conference on top of a basketball conference. And I'm always going to be the football coach at a basketball school if I go to UNC. I mean, if you want to go back to the 1990s, when we were younger, you saw Spurrier come up through Duke and have to go, okay, man, I got to go to Florida. And then at UNC, you saw Mac Brown round one, right? Mac Brown round one was all kinds of successful against anybody that wasn't a Seminole, right?
Right. And
eventually had to go, okay, you know what, I'm leaving because I can't do anything else here at UNC. And I'm sure John Summerall, I mean, if you're a guy who's willing to leave the program that you're with, you know that you can only go so far with Tulane, right? Got a beautiful stadium and on the campus again, thankfully, but you can only go so far with that. And you go, maybe this isn't the opportunity for me. If I'll stay, I'll stick where I am. I like Tulane. I'm doing good with Tulane. I got a Cotton Bowl out of this, Right. Why don't I stay here? So, I don't know how credible that stuff was, but there was a lot of buzz about it.
So the buzz was there, and this is kind of just leading me into the fact that there's been a Tulane, and as you said, when we were in college back in the early 2000s, the aughts, whatever you want to call them, there wasn't a real presence of any sports on campus. I haven't been back since I left, but I'm assuming that there's buzz on campus now. I'm assuming these games are well attended. But the Fritz and Summerall era in Tulane football has really brought about a major turnaround. I still remember. I forget when they played USC. I forget which bowl game it was, but this was before the college playoffs, I believe, at least in terms of its current iteration. And this was they beat USC on a New Year's Day bowl game, and that was amazing. That was the interim coach between Willie Fritz and John Summerall. But yeah, I mean, they've had a real resurgence, and obviously this year they've played lights out. They faced Ole Miss in the college football playoffs. They lost. Any thoughts on this season?
I liked the way that Tulane kind of started slow and really ended strong.
Right.
I was really disappointed after that loss to the Gators in 24.
Right.
And that after the absolute elation of winning that Cotton Bowl game. And I'll never let any Chicago Bears fan forget that about their quarterback, Caleb Williams. He lost that game to Tulane. You guys lost to Tulane.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. You had a pretty magical season in a conference that's getting better. Every year, I feel like AAC. It used to be a joke. It was like Conference USA was a joke. I'm sorry. I don't mean that in a mean way. It's true though. They were a joke, and then we left and we went to AAC, and it's gotten better every single year. You got the two military colleges in there. They're competitive every year, which is next to impossible for their athletes, and kudos to them for being able to do that. But Tulane, looked great this year. They managed to work the transfer portal. They got a great quarterback out of that, and that that speaks volumes to who Tulane is and where they are right now as a team. Sort of the trajectory of what they could be if they really want to grow that thing. You look at them, making it to the playoff. The first team from Louisiana to make it to the playoffs. Take that, LSU fan. 2 years in my adult life, in my 40s, I might add, we've managed to end the season ranked higher than LSU. We won the Cotton Bowl against Caleb Williams and USC that one year,
right.
And of course we. This year, LSU was a mess. They finally got smart and got rid of, I'm not even going to say his name, a lightning bolt might come straight from Baton Rouge and strike me down as I walk out my front door today. But, so I see a lot of success there. And I think a big part of that, like a huge part of that, we can talk about all the machinations that led Tulane to where they were, to be an abysmal football program, tearing down Tulane Stadium, moving the games to the Superdome or half the Superdome, so on and so out. I see that putting that stadium on campus, putting Ullman right there at the back end, just right next to the baseball stadium, which they never had any trouble packing out that baseball stadium, whether it was when we were in school and they were really good, or even some of those lesser years in there. They never had any trouble filling that thing out because it's beautiful and it's right there on campus. And putting that football stadium on campus next to that was as smart a move as ever. If you want to have a good football team, you got to have a good place to play. You got to have a place where fans want to come, where TV wants to take pictures, all that stuff. You got to have all the bells and whistles to go with that. And it's impressive to see them build that and to move their program into modernity. I think that's really the story with Tulane is we can work we can be an academically excellent school and work the transfer portal. That's hard to do, right? It's hard to manage that because there's no blueprint for it yet. And we got to the playoffs, all right? And hey, do I hate losing to Ole Miss? Yes, I do. Would I love to stomp Ole Miss, sometime in the near future? Of course. Maybe Tulane makes a move into the SEC. I don't know. I'm not the one making these decisions for these strings,
right?
But I was very impressed with them, even if I was sad to see them get knocked out of the playoffs that quick.
Right. No, maybe, I don't know. Obviously, you're kind of, I don't know if you're dreaming or just kind of putting it out in the atmosphere, so maybe it happens, or I don't know. I don't know exactly. Obviously, we both want to see Tulane remain an academic institution and kind of push towards that kind of great minds and bringing in smart scholars and doing things to build a community of smart people. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing Tulane really build up the sports program. And obviously, I think it was with you I was talking about this. Football is basically the biggest driver of economics for a university. It'd be nice to, and I haven't paid as much attention to Tulane as I should have since I left. I don't know what the donors look like. I don't know what the purse looks like. I know it was pretty big when I was there, so maybe they don't even need this. But, I'm a sports fan. This is a sports podcast, so seeing Tulane move up in conference would be nice. They did bring in a lot of transfers this year, not just at quarterback and wide receiver as well. But yeah, in terms of the Ole Miss game, They looked okay over the first half. The second half, they just wore down. They're just smaller. The athletes just aren't there with the Ole Miss players. And we saw that the first game. I was hopeful they would keep it close. They didn't, but it was absolutely amazing. The win was getting into the college football playoffs, as you said, and being the highest ranked group of 5, group of 6 team, the non-major conference team. So yeah.
Look, and here's the thing. Tulane has never been sure about what they wanted to do between academics and athletics, right? But I can tell you this. It's impressive to me, and one of the things I remember about football when I was there was they had so much trouble getting students to work on these games, and I had a roommate who was working with them who didn't really enjoy it, and I always had Mike from athletics blowing up my answering machine. We still had answering machines back then, right?
Right.
And I don't want to go all the way back to the Knicks in the '90s or anything like that, but it was we were basically still in the '90s in 2000 2001,
okay.
and I had Mike from athletics blowing up my answering machine, right? And the guys had heart, but and you could take that heart and run with it, whether that means toughness and athleticism, like some of the basketball I used to watch when I was a kid, or otherwise. But I guarantee they don't have trouble getting students to work those games and work those concession stands and stuff.
Sure.
They don't have a Mike from athletics blowing up the answering machine, if you know what I mean.
Sure. And that's a perfect segue to the post game. So, Scott, as you just mentioned, you had fandom of the NBA in the 90s. As you mentioned in your intro segment, you were basically a Knicks fan. I love that you're a Knicks fan because I've obviously got the New York connection. I was not a big basketball fan in the 90s, but, my friend Johnny Joe Boo, who was on the podcast last week, discussed this. Talk to me about your love of John Starks and the 90s Knicks.
I want to tie this all together. So, a lot of watching sports, back then was about what you could get, right? So in a way, like a lot of us were Cubs fans or Bulls fans when we wouldn't have been otherwise, because you could get WGN on cable, right? There were a lot of Knicks games because, they love broadcasting games from Madison Square Garden, right?
Mecca.
I mean, it's just like... just like I was saying about the Ullman Stadium at Tulane, if you have a beautiful backdrop to what you're filming, then you're more likely to get media there. And plus, if you nationally televise a New York game, you're going to get a nice viewership because you're going to get a nice viewership out of New York, right? Yep. So I got to see a lot of Knicks games, and those things were so compelling. Those teams were. You had the oil slick Pat Riley. The guy was stylish. He was stylish enough for L.A. and New York. Like, how many guys can say that, right?
Bridge the gap. Bridge the
You're
gap.
looking at his career, man. The guy went to Miami. The guy did L.A., New York, and Miami. Who could do that, dude? Like, really, who could do that? But I loved all those teams. You had your enforcers. Anthony Mason with the crazy stuff shaved in the side of his head. I'm not cool enough to do that. Look, my head's just man. You had Charles Oakley, who wrote a great book about his time with the Knicks. So I love those teams. I loved Ewing. If you go back and look at old pictures of my dad when my dad still had a mustache, my dad kind of looks like Pat Ewing. It's weird, but so you have kind of like all these weird ties. I love the style of how they played, and I always loved John Starks because he was one of those stories, the guy was like working at a grocery store, or something like that. He was Canadian, and he made it into the NBA, and not only did he make it in the NBA, but he had a really fine career. I mean, was it the most longevity? Did he score? No, he was a streaky shooter. He was really great sometimes and really not great other times. He was a defensive guy. So, defensive guys don't always get that appreciation. I mean, if you're not Rodman, if you're not like painting your hair a different color every week and marrying Carmen Electra, you don't necessarily get that love. But, John Starks was the one that was drawing that assignment. You have a playoff series. You have a best of 7 with the Bulls, man. He's going to be the one primarily guarding Jordan, right? So, okay, no wonder he's a streaky shooter. Jordan's going to be messing with him that whole game. You know this, right? But I love that guy. I love those teams. And I'll draw it together with how I know you, too. Because, the reason I walked down the hallway and I met you all the way back all those years ago when we were going to Tulane is music, right? And, there's 2 mentions of John Starks in popular music. Do you know any of these?
You've mentioned this to me. Go for it. Give me, enlighten me. You told me.
They both involve a Tribe Called Quest, ironically enough.
Yes.
One of them is 8 Million Stories. It's on, Midnight Marauders, right? And so that's all Fife guy, right? But, he has that line that ends of, he's having a bad day, and to top it off, Starks got ejected, right? And then the other mention that I know of, and I haven't been able to find anything else, I've looked all over, is in the Beastie Boys song, I believe, what is it? It's not Sure Shot. It's the Pineapple Now and Later's. Oh my God, it's the name of the song will come to me, but Q-Tip says he's got heart like John Starks. And so you have 2 great sort of mentions by these like classic hip hop New York guys. Fife Dog and Q-Tip as cool as anybody comes, and that's kind of that's kind of a nice stamp on sort of our friendship and where that generated from, right? Is you just thought it was like cool and down the hall and listening to like great jazz and Jamiroquai. I didn't know anybody else. Jamiroquai, man, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like this dude's all right. He's a cool kid, man. He knows what he's talking about. He's dialed in. I got to know this guy. So, and I'll tell you, another one of my close friends, he was a New York fan. His dad was from Jersey. And so one of our bonding points back then was we were both Knicks fans, we were both Mets fans. So we had that kind of tie to those blue and orange teams. I'm not a Rangers fan because I'm not a hockey fan. I grew up in the South, man. What do you want me to do? There's no ice down here, But I love those teams, man. They had a great character. They never quite got over the hump. Sometimes I feel like that's the story of my life. They had that one year, and then they ran into Hakeem Olajuwon, and that just didn't end well, obviously. But they were a great story, and I think that's one of the things that I really get into with sports is I love a good story. It's one of the things I love about baseball, man. It's a great story.
Right, as you've kind of noted throughout the show, you're a storyline guy. You have stories, you tell stories, you listen to stories, you love stories. So I appreciate that about you. I'm not a storyteller, but I do enjoy a good story, which is why I enjoy you, because you always tell a good story. But I do want to finalize our discussion with something you kind of brought up in that discussion of the Knicks. You said back then you kind of watched who you watched, and you got what you got. And I'll just say, just from my perspective, in my household, we didn't get WGN. We got TBS, which is a Braves station. So my early years were kind of conflicted because I was watching the Braves a lot. Obviously, I got the Mets as well on the local channel. But I actually became kind of a Braves fan during that time, so I'm kind of somewhat of an outcast among my Mets-loving friends because I kind of like the Braves. I keep that quiet as much as possible among the New Yorkers, but I'll let that out here. And I still like the Spencer Striders, the Freddie Freemans. I still enjoy some of the Braves players today. But yeah, but you were mentioning this idea that back then we kind of watched what we watched. We all saw the same stuff. Now there's so many options, but they're all over the place. Netflix, Prime, ESPN Plus, other streaming services. So what are your thoughts on the streaming era of sports?
It's frustrating, man. It is frustrating. I mean, sometimes it's absurd. If you told me that I was going to fire up Netflix to watch boxing, even 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I would have laughed in your face, right? If you had told me that I was going to have to get on Amazon Prime to watch Thursday Night Football. I mean, I know Thursday Night Football has been kind of a crapshoot from the beginning, right? We could discuss how that looks, if you want, but really. It's a fractured landscape, and one of the tough and more confusing things is like, okay, look, man, this is the United States. We like convenience, right? We vote for convenience, whether that's fortunate or unfortunate. And I don't mean just with politics. I mean that with 7-Eleven. I mean that with car shopping. I mean that with if you want a one-stop shop for anything, there's somebody out there in this country trying to offer you that. And finance it and put some neon lights behind it and, maybe some dancing girls or like a dog that balances a beach ball in his nose or something like that. I don't know, whatever, right? I mean, it's been a confusing and challenging thing, and I have to look to guys like you who are really dialed in to figure out kind of what that looks like. Where do I go for this stuff? I know you had some thoughts on that, but I didn't know if you wanted to get into that or if, but that's a frustrating thing for me that I can't just flip the TV on, or I feel like I can't. Maybe I can. I don't know, but I feel like I can't just flip the TV on. I got to look. I got to be intentional about it, and I don't necessarily want to be intentional, man. Sports are for relaxation, for me at least.
Right, so you brought up some of your frustration with things that have happened in your own neighborhood, but I also get to the points about maybe some of the things that, because I know you work in hospitality, you've done some things behind the bar, so how is that kind of fractured sports landscape affected the bars? What have you seen there? What's been kind of your viewing experience at bars or kind of being out on the town?
Well, Rob, it's a tough thing, man. You have to decide to steer the direction of your establishment one way or the other. Are we a TV bar or not? Are we a sports bar or not? That kind of thing, right? And then with that comes all the trappings of that, like, oh, am I going to put certain beers on draft or not, or that kind of thing. And there's a definite disconnect as far as that feeling of can I put the game on and everybody's going to show up, or everybody's going to show up and assume that whatever game it is they want is going to be on, right? So, how often do it's a Saturday or Sunday night and I got to field a bunch of phone calls like, hey, are you going to be playing this game? Or they won't even ask directly, oh, do you have this streaming service? Because I want to watch, whatever. And they're trying to poke and prod you for that when it used to be just a monoculture where you showed up and you were going to get the local game, or you were going to get afternoon baseball, Cubs and Cardinals or something like that, or Yankees, Red Sox or whatever, depending on what Atlanta Braves and the New York Mets. If this is the 90s, it'd be Atlanta Braves with murderers row of pitchers and John Franco and a bunch of bums for the Mets, Yeah, I don't know. So it's been a frustrating thing, and it's been a frustrating thing to kind of direct that from because people do have that expectation, and post-COVID world, things change a lot, right? And you have to react to that, but there's not that same assumption. There's not that tether. I'll put it like that. There's not that tether of sameness. You have to kind of decide and look at and go, okay, well, this is what we're doing, whether that for better or for worse. And I wonder if there's not a better solution for that, but I don't know what the answer to that question is.
Sure. And I have mentioned my particular views on this to you. I'm not going to get into the specifics of what I told you, but I think there are some kind of monolithic spots where you can find more sports than not sports. Again, they're not cheap, so that's obviously one of the things that any person in America has to think about is where do I want to put my hard-earned dollars towards. And all these options, whether it's Netflix, Amazon, ESPN, Unlimited, ESPN Plus, they're all not cheap. So yeah, I get that it's been a fracturing of the whole scene just in terms of what we can get at home. And then as you're saying, when you go to the bar, you have to decide, first off, whether you're going to have that sports bar mentality. And second off, what games you're going to play, because you could watch, Western Kentucky on this channel, or you could watch Duke on this channel, or you could watch, some football on this channel. And it's just crazy. But yeah. Anyway, Scott, I want to thank you for being my guest. Appreciate you coming on. Much love, and hopefully we'll be in touch soon. I would love to have you back on in the spring, maybe, or later on, and maybe we'll do another podcast about some other stuff down the line if we get time to do that. And we've talked about it, but we'll think about it.
Hey man, this is a blast. Thanks for having me, Rob. All the best with this episode and beyond, my friend.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Scott. Thanks.
Thanks.